Hello and thank you for tuning in. This is Greg with Picks in Motion. I'm sitting in for Mark today because he is out of the country on vacation, and we cannot skip this big colossal thing that is the Nintendo Switch event that happened just last night. There was so much exciting stuff and I'm not going to ignore it. So here we are. Let's get started. The first thing I would like to talk about is the presentation itself. It was lively and goofy, and I fully expected it to be completely the opposite. I expected it to be very businesslike and dry and a lot of stuff that was meant for investors rather than gamers and consumers. Instead, we got this fun presentation with a lot of fresh faces, a lot of new games, and some very exciting technology. Overall, I think the fact that they had all these fresh faces really spoke to the audience and told people that this is a new Nintendo. This is not the same one that handled the Wii U, and this is going to usher a new era for the company. And this is very exciting all by itself. I think it was incredibly smart on Nintendo's part to announce the launch date and the price right at the start of the show. This allowed everybody to focus on the system and its games throughout the rest of the show. Now, what do I think of the release date? March 3rd? That's right at the beginning of the month. That's not too far away. And honestly, I think it's great. I didn't expect it to be quite so soon. I expected something like the 17th, which was really circling around the various rumors prior to the show, or possibly even later than that, right at the very tail end of the month. But no, it's March 3rd. That's really awesome. As for the price, it's a bit shocking to me because this launch seems to share so much in common with the Wii launch. On one hand, you have a casual game in 1-2 Switch, which I'll talk about in a little bit here. It's a very party fun kind of game, but not likely to have a lot of meat on its bones for the core player. Whereas on the flip side of that, they are also launching with Zelda Breath of the Wild, which will undoubtedly bring in a lot of core gamers. Now, when you compare this to the Wii launch, they had Wii Sports and then Zelda Twilight Princess. And it's amazing how similar these are, but then you look at the price point, and the Switch is launching at $299, which is a bit more than the Wii. Not that I think it's a bad price point, but I do think it's a little surprising considering how much they've struggled to sell the Wii U at the same price point. Now let's take a look at the hardware, because the Nintendo Switch is an interesting piece of technology to say the least. First, let's take a look at the Joy-Con controllers. Essentially, every single Switch console is going to come with 2 full controllers, which is pretty amazing to say the least. So, each Joy-Con contains 1 analog stick, A, B, X, Y buttons, as well as L and R bumpers. That's pretty awesome. Remember, there are 2 of these with every system. Granted, they aren't going to be much good for like shooters or anything like that, but they will be great for many other games. That's plenty of buttons for most games. And I gotta say, in a weird kind of way, the Switch really makes me think that this is kind of a Wii 2.0. Now don't get me wrong, I think that this is going to be a big leap ahead of what the Wii was doing. What I mean to say is that this really builds on a lot of the ideas that were established with the original Wii. Take the HD Rumble, for example. There's this really awesome ice water demo. If you haven't watched it, go ahead and check it out really quick.
Also has a motion IR camera that can sense the shape, motion, and distance of objects in front of it. It's right here. For example, it can tell the difference between rock, paper, and scissors. And it can tell how far away the hand that threw it is. This will make unique new control styles possible. What's this? It feels like something shaking in a glass. The Joy-Con can convey to you the feeling of ice cubes colliding in a cup. You can even tell 1, 2, 3, the number of ice cubes in the glass. And you can feel water filling the glass. This new sense of realism is produced by the precision of the new HD rumble. With these new sensing and vibration technologies, the Joy-Con itself boasts an expressiveness that invites the player to pick up the controller. The Joy-Con offers more than just traditional video game controls. It invites everyone to a new world of entertainment. Allow me to introduce you to two new games made possible by the Joy-Con, one that everyone can play together, and one with depth, challenge, and replayability. First, let's switch to the game everyone can play together.
Now that you've seen the demo for yourself, you can see why this is kind of exciting. The fact that the guy was able to add ice cubes to the glass and actually feel the difference in the controller is amazing. Now, of course, this is all theoretical. We won't know if it actually does deliver on this promise until we actually hold this thing for ourselves. But let's consider this a possibility. Let's consider the fact that when you do these sword fights, these motion sword fights for example, and the two swords clash, you'll actually feel the resistance push back as you swing and you hit the other person's sword, even though it's an imaginary sword. The possibilities here are really, really quite amazing. Let's look a little bit closer at that sword demonstration that I was talking about. How could this be possible? How could the Switch Joy-Cons possibly know if two imaginary swords are clashing? Because obviously it's going to have to know that in order to give the proper rumble response, right? Well, that's where this new IR technology comes into play. It's a 3D sensing IR, where basically it can sense objects, whether they are far or close, and it can detect all these things in various ways. And not only that, there's a very quick response with this technology in general. Now, check out this standoff demo that was introduced at the very beginning of the 1-2 Switch gameplay demo. Now I know it doesn't seem like much, but having a very quick response time like that with a motion controller is crucial to having an awesome experience with the motion controls. During the event, there was also a number of other details shared regarding the hardware. Local multiplayer, for example, supports up to 8 Switch units working in tandem. That can be pretty awesome, especially considering Konami announced a new Bomberman game. Now, the screen is another thing. A lot of people have speculated about this screen for quite some time, and now we finally know it is a multi-touch capable screen that measures 6.2 inches, which is just a hair bigger than the Wii U's screen, I believe. And this screen is 720p, which, if you ask me, is very, very adequate for that size. Now, unsurprisingly, there were no actual hardware specs given. They didn't even mention the type of horsepower under the hood. But you know, I've come to expect that from Nintendo, so it doesn't really bother me all that much. And then there were the games. Holy crap, where do I start? I guess I should start right where Nintendo started the presentation. And that would be with 1-2 Switch. The best way to describe 1-2 Switch is to say that it's a Wii Sports style casual game that is directly aimed at showing off what the Joy-Con controllers can do. And it certainly does some wacky things with those controllers. One demo shows a standoff, Western style standoff, And then you have like sword fighting, you have table tennis, you have a eating contest, all kinds of weird stuff that you would almost more likely find in a Wario game, but here it is in 1-2 Switch. Then Nintendo shows off ARMS. Now, if you are in your 30s like I am, you more than likely remember the toy Stretch Armstrong. Basically, it was a toy where his arms could stretch really far, okay? ARMS is basically a Stretch Armstrong styled boxing game with projectile shooting mechanics. Now, that sounds wacky enough all by itself, and to be honest, I'm not sure what to make of this one. It's kind of strange, and I'm kind of intrigued, and I'm not sure if I want to pre-order it or not, but I'm definitely checking it out. Then Nintendo had a few surprise sequels. Prior to the show, there were rumors circulating that a number of Wii U games would be ported to the Switch, which to me seemed kind of dumb, to be honest. So instead, we get to the show and find out that we are getting Splatoon 2 and Xenoblade 2. Now, as far as Splatoon goes, I'm not really sure what all it adds or what it brings to the table. My main interest here is to see whether or not they actually add a full single-player campaign. I'm not sure if they will or not, but I really hope so. As far as Xenoblade goes, I bought the last two, so I'm sure I'm going to be buying this one. And I think that they made a wise decision when they changed the visual style of the characters. A lot of people complained with the last two games that the characters just look kind of weird. And I think that this Ni no Kuni style of cel-shaded anime characters just fits much better with the beautiful world that Monolith Soft creates. So now, speaking of RPGs, we gotta talk about Square Enix for a minute. Holy crap! All of a sudden they're like all buddy-buddy with Nintendo, it seems. So not only did they reiterate that not Final Fantasy, but Dragon Quest X, the MMO that's currently on the Wii over in Japan, is making its way to Nintendo Switch. That's pretty big news all by itself. But even bigger than that is that Dragon Quest XI, which is also coming to the 3DS and PS4, is coming to the Switch as well. Now what's interesting about this, beyond the fact that it's a new mainline Dragon Quest game, is that it's powered by Unreal Engine 4, which should be very interesting to see on the Switch. And given how good Xenoblade 2 looks, I have to imagine that Dragon Quest XI will be at least equally good looking in terms of graphics. Now the Dragon Quest party didn't stop there. Square Enix also announced Dragon Quest Heroes 1 and 2, a compilation for the Switch. And they weren't even done yet, believe it or not. They announced that I don't want to call it an indie, but it's a Chrono Trigger inspired JRPG called I Am Setsuna, which is currently on Steam, PS4, and I believe Xbox One for download. But it's a cool looking RPG, and unfortunately, it's definitely, in the visual department at least, going to be outclassed by the weirdly named Octopath Traveler. Now this RPG looks amazing. Now it's not the 3D showcase that is Final Fantasy 15 or anything like that, but it takes these 2D sprites and this 2D pixel art and puts it on this, like, it just coats it in this really shiny, amazing looking coat of paint, and you just gotta see it, and it's amazing looking, and I cannot wait to see what comes of this. Now, there was also a number of unexpected things that were announced for the Switch at this event, one of which might not have been so much expected, but definitely welcome, and that comes from Bethesda. They announced that Skyrim will be making its way to the Switch. Unfortunately, they didn't divulge any details as to whether or not this is the special edition that recently released on the Xbox One and PS4, or if this is simply the vanilla version of the game. But whatever the case, this is pretty awesome for Nintendo players who may not have played Skyrim. Not only that, it also brings Skyrim and Elder Scrolls in general into the portable scene for the first time. One or two actually really unexpected games that were announced were Ultra Street Fighter 2, which I had no idea what the heck that was until I looked at it. And it looks like it's actually a reworked Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo HD remix, which take that however you want. I like the game. I'm not sure that this one is going to add enough for me to purchase it again, but time will tell. Now, one game that I absolutely did not see coming anytime soon, mainly because it's owned by Konami now, is Super Bomberman. And Super Bomberman R was, in fact, announced and shown in playable form for the Switch. It supports up to 8 Switch units for multiplayer even. So if you're in your 30s, again, like I am, you'll remember Bomberman as being this great multiplayer experience back in the old days. Now, F-Zero got some love from some indie developers as well. Granted, these aren't actual F-Zero games, but they are as close as you can get without Nintendo making an F-Zero game or, letting Sega make one like they did with F-Zero GX. So we're getting Red Out, which is a almost Star Wars pod racer style of game. It's kind of similar to Wipeout as well. And then Fast RMX from the makers of Fast Racing Neo. Now, if you played that game on the Wii U, you know that they know what they're doing. And so this is plenty of reason to get excited if you're into that genre. And then, of course, there were the big guns. Super Mario Odyssey and Zelda Breath of the Wild. Super Mario Odyssey was super unexpected. Now, I don't mean that I wasn't expecting to see the game at all at the show, but I expected something a bit different, a bit more Mushroom Kingdom. And instead what we got is something almost regular. It shows Mario running around this city environment, wall jumping between buildings to reach the rooftops. And it has one mechanic that stood out a lot, and that is the ability to throw your cap and then jump off your cap in midair to reach previously unattainable areas. I'm really excited to play this game. Like, it's going to be awesome. And then, of course, there was Zelda. Now, we've seen numerous gameplay demonstrations of Zelda Breath of the Wild throughout the last year or two, and this was the first time that Nintendo actually showed a cinematic video for the game. And it looked amazing. It looked super exciting. Yes, Zelda has voice acting now. I'm not worried. Based on the trailer, I don't think it's going to be nearly as cringeworthy as Metroid Other M was. So, those of you who are worried, just hold on. Wait until you actually see the game and hear it for yourself. I don't think it's going to really be that bad. Now, the interesting thing with this software lineup, which, by the way, the games I mentioned are not all of them, is that they have such a wide array of big stuff, many of which are spread out throughout the year. So, Nintendo's going to launch with 1-2 Switch and Zelda as probably its biggest games at launch. That is huge already. 1-2 Switch could very well sell systems, as well as Zelda. They appeal to very different crowds in different ways, I think, but I think they're going to both drive sales just as well. But then in the summertime, we get a sequel to Splatoon, the biggest surprise success from the Wii U era. And then, following that, in the fall or holiday season, will be Super Mario Odyssey. So you can already see that Nintendo has its first year covered really, really well in the software department. That's not to say that everything was rosy in terms of software, because it certainly wasn't. A few key players certainly dropped the ball during the show. Take Ubisoft for example. They announced Just Dance and nothing else, though I will give them credit since I did notice footage of Steep and an unknown Rayman game in the gameplay montage, so that gives me hope that they will be supporting the Switch in the future, just as they have the last two Nintendo systems. Then there's EA. They completely dropped the ball with this. The only game that they announced at this show was FIFA, which is not going to sell anything within North America. I was really hoping to see Electronic Arts announce something along the lines of Battlefield or Titanfall, but unfortunately that did not happen, though I guess I somewhat expected that. Then there's Activision. Now, given the fact that they release Call of Duty games on mobile devices of all things, you would think that they would at least port those titles over to the Switch, but they aren't, apparently. So far, the only title they've announced that I know of anyways is Skylanders, which I guess makes sense since even that sells decent on the Wii U, but still, with such a wealth of great games, why haven't Activision, EA, and Ubisoft taken advantage of the hype surrounding the Nintendo Switch and announced some big heavy hitters for the system? I don't really understand. And then there's some other things that we're kind of missing. Take Ubisoft for example. There was a rumored game that was a collaboration between Nintendo and Ubisoft, a Mario and Rabbids RPG. Now, I was pretty sure that this was going to show up because that sounds like a heck of a deal and something really big for Ubisoft, but it was nowhere to be found. Perhaps we'll see it at E3. I guess we'll just have to wait and find out. Now, before I close out this segment, I do want to say that Nintendo said that the software shown is not everything. They said that there are more than 80 titles currently in development and that there will be more announcements in the coming weeks. And of course, we all know that there's going to probably be many more announcements come E3 this summer. So let's just sit tight and see what comes. Until then, I'm going to enjoy the fact that the Switch doesn't have the same games as the other two systems. That's exactly what I want out of this thing. So this, to me, is very good news. That being said, I do hope that they get a lot of third-party support. I just hope that it's original games, as well as a few good ports, and not just a bunch of ports with nothing original. Overall, I really enjoyed this conference with Nintendo. I think that their message was on point. I think they really delivered on the idea behind it. I think they really communicated it really well. I look forward to seeing what else Nintendo has in store, and I am anxious to get my own. In fact, I have actually pre-ordered 2 units at 2 separate stores because I wanted to make sure that I get one on launch day. In addition, I went ahead and pre-ordered Zelda as well as one to Switch. I'm not sure about other games yet. I'm kind of waiting to see what else gets announced for the launch, but for now, those are the 2 games I'm going to get in addition to the system. So I want to know, have any of you pre-ordered the Switch? What did you think of the show? Let me know in the comments, and stay tuned in the coming weeks because Mark will be back and him and I will be actually discussing this whole thing once he's back in US territory. And that's going to be a very, very, very fun discussion that I'm looking forward to anxiously. Until then, happy gaming.